So we have seen the wizards that are involved in the localization, which typically localizes the application into different locales or different geographies. Okay. So this again increases the customer base for our application, and in order to cater for different regions or different geographies, we tend to go for localization. And this is not something we do on a daily basis, definitely not. This is probably a one-time or a two-time task whenever you're looking for a release or for an expansion or something. Right? So this is not something we do on a daily basis, the localization part. And we have also seen the localized rule sets and how the localization is going to work and all. Right? So today we'll talk about data pages. Right? So one of the key important aspects of PEGA is your data pages. Using a data page lets us have a reduced number of DB hits. Okay? So instead of hitting the DB multiple times, we get all the data onto the D page, and as and when it is required, we would be using it on the case. Okay? So this is like an on-demand data retrieval that happens from the D page. Okay? And we have different scopes for it. We have restrictions on who can access it or who can change it or not. So we'll be looking at that. Right? And once you start creating a D page, we have a lot of other details coming inside it. Okay. I think we'll just log in into the application. So the other day I was not able to log in, remember? So then I had to go back to my administrator at the ratepega.com. Then I had to change the operators rule set instances. Only then I was able to loading. Okay. So yes, we'll go ahead with creating data types and D pages. Okay, so I think I'll go ahead and create one more data type. So I'm going to records directly. Name your student ID is an integer. First name, last name, and maybe grade. So 3 data pages are being created: single, list, and savable. So these three are going to be the default D pages created, but as per the requirement, we can go ahead create more data types with different configurations. So yes, we have got D pages created. Along with the D pages, we have a database table that's created in the backend for the data type. All those fields that we've added, they turned out to be columns. Then a mapping rule, which maps the property on the PEGA side to the column on the DB side. Then there's a report definition rule. Then 3D pages, single, list, and save. Close this. And now I would like to add in some records here. So this is going to be a system of records where the records lie with PEGA internal to it. There can be other sources also, like my data could be coming from other external applications where we use connectors in order to retrieve that information or other APIs. Yes. So I can in fact import an entire Excel sheet so that I can get my records on this system of record. Now let me just add in few. Okay, so let's assume some random records here. And here are my D pages. Let's look at them. And the 0 represents no references of these D pages yet. So they're not being used anywhere across the application so far is what it represents. Okay, yes, here comes D underscore student. Earlier, these were called declarative pages. They're part of the declarative rules.
So when we created a data type, after that, when we clicked on those that checkbox to create all the D pages also, after that we got the screen where it was like that the database table mapping is done
Correct, correct,
and a report definition is created.
correct.
So, but some days back when I was trying it, The database table was not created automatically. I had to create it. The database table mapping was done. I had to do it manually. It was not done automatically. The table was created. I had to go and create it in the DB first and then map it.
Oh, is it? Which version was it? Which version were you using?
It was 8.5 only.
8.5 only. Mm,
Yeah. So now when you showed that a database table is created, I got confused.
I mean, ideally, by default, the system would create it for us. For any data type, if you are configuring the source, it will create
Mhm.
um, a table, a mapping rule. I mean, all these 6 entities are like standard. When you configure the source, these 6 would be created. I mean, are you sure you configured the source or you
Yeah.
directly
I
created a data type and then
I first created a data type, then I added properties
okay.
in the data model,
Okay,
and then I
okay.
did a configure source.
Mm, okay. But ideally, yes, it should have to create the table mapping and the report definition also.
Okay, because then I had to go and do the mapping also, the table mapping also I did manually.
Oh, okay, okay. So generally, the system takes care of it, the mapping rule and the table creation and all of that. Until
So
unless maybe.
it
Mhm.
it is there in 8.5 as well, right? The table
Yeah, yeah.
mapping and
Even in
everything it is.
earlier versions also. Yeah, starting from the earlier versions, it was there.
Okay. Yeah, maybe once I'll check again.
True. Okay. 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 Right. So then we'll
Yes.
look at the page definition. So the first thing that we see is the structure, which defines what kind of or how many entities are you looking at? Is it like are you just accessing a single entity or are you looking at multiple entities? So that depending upon that, I can either choose a page or a list. So this tells are you looking at accessing multiple records or just one record? So accordingly, we can choose the structure. Initially, the notion used to be like data pages are only for retrieval. But now after we got the savable D pages, I can also save the data back into the DB using my D page. So it's both retrieval and at the same time the write also. Both are possible. Okay, the read and write both. Then I have the object type. So this tells what kind of information my data page is going to hold. So here we would give the page definition. It could be student data, or it could be a data dash employee, data dash candidate, data dash product, anything which says what kind of data my the page is going to hold. Then the important thing, yes, we have modes here. So mode says how would you like to use your D page? Is it just a read only? As in, are you looking at displaying something? All your FAQs that you see on the screen, or things like standard references or something. So those are typically the read-only ones, which are only part of your display purpose. And if the mode is read-only, I can see this D page, or I can see this D page under the data pages category on the clipboard. Okay? On the clipboard, we have 4 different categories, right? If the mode is read only, you can see it under the data pages category of the clipboard. Okay, whereas if it's editable, you can see it under the user pages category, where you are letting the user interact with it, right? So it goes into the user pages category. And yes, the D page can be edited here. You can edit. Then whereas the last one is savable. So if you use the savable D page, you can save the changes that you have made or the changes that you have brought directly into the D. So for this, we would be using a separate shape. I mean, there's an entire different process of how you use a savable D page. So there's a separate step called savable pages, and you would use it, or you can also use it on the post processing of your flow action. So if you have to add multiple save options, you can do that directly on the flow action. So anyways, we'll be looking into it. So according to the data, what are you planning to do with the data? Is it just a read only? Are you looking at editing it, or are you also looking at saving it? Accordingly, I can choose the modes. So then we have got the scopes. How can I access this D page? Or the changes that you made on the D page should be reflected until which scope are defined on the scope here. First one is the thread scope, where each case instance we create is called as a thread, right? So when your D page is related to a particular thread, I mean, the changes that you make on the D page in a thread will not be applicable or will not be reflected on the other thread. So that is where when you scope, when you use the scope called thread. So it could be the same D page, but it would not reflect the changes made in one thread. They will not be reflected on the other thread. So which means for each case, it is going to be independent. Okay. Then we have got the scope called requester. So requester scope is when for the same operator, you see the changes made by the operator will be available or will be reflected in the rest of the transactions that he make. Like for example, I think the standard example for this could be some account transactions a person makes. Suppose I log in into my banking account, okay? I make a purchase or I make some online transaction. Okay? So that's considered a case. That's considered a thread. Now, after the purchase, my balance will reduce. Some amount is debited. Now, if I start one more transaction, I will see the reduced balance, not the original one. Correct? Because even though the case is different, the scope is a requester scope. My D page will hold or will have the changes that I make in each case. It is reflected across all the transactions. So the data here is more likely it is associated to the operator. And then you have the node scope. So node scope is the highest scope where the changes made on the D page will be available or will be reflected for all the users accessing the application. So just like book my ticket, right? So the tickets, if I have to book and if they are part of my D page, and suppose I start booking a transaction for like 2 seats. Now those 2 seats would be blocked for the other user, correct? And if he wants to use it, he cannot. It says the seats are already blocked because the D page is accessible by all the users. So imagine what happens if this seat booking D page is of the thread scope. So I can only book multiple tickets for the same seats again and again, right? Because it is irrespective of my cases. Yeah. So on this scenario,
Yes.
my scope has to be definitely a node scope. Okay, it cannot even be thread also. No, it cannot be thread because I book a ticket. Well, probably I book 2 seats. The next time I log in, I see those 2 seats are blocked, and I can book some other tickets. But when other user logs in, he sees everything is empty because on his requester scope, no seats are booked already. So he sees every seat is available. So for my scenario, thread scope is not going to work. Requester is also not going to work. Only node scope works. Okay. This combination of the object type, mode, and scopes will define how you are letting the users access your D pages. Okay? So they are very, very important. Even though we get a default one by the application, we can always go ahead change it. In fact, we can create our own D pages also with the specifications and the business requirements.